First on film and entertainment, Alex first with you, joined by Peter Krause, the part 2 of the Boxing Day releases, also looking ahead to what has just been released on New Year's Day. Happy New Year to you, Peter.
And to you.
And are you going to be your recalcitrant, I can't even get the word out, your obstreperous self?
Always. That's my New Year's resolution.
I would not want it any other way, my friend, and wish you and your family well in 2025 and beyond. So always appreciate your contributions, and especially when you and I differ, which seems to be reasonably frequently. And in fact, I think we'll start there because there's a movie that opened the Jewish International Film Festival, which has now been lauded as some film that could potentially tackle the Oscars. As far as I'm concerned, it's called A Real Pain. I could actually call it something else. I think A Real Pain is actually appropriate as a name, but for different reasons than you, Peter. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Well, Jesse Eisenberg, I mean, this is one of the releases there were 7 major releases on Boxing Day. And this was one that obviously when you've got a film festival, often the English is a good example of that, but German as well and Italian, when a movie you first get to see at a festival and then it gets a general release. In this case, I'm presuming is A Real Pain, has Eddie Tamir been the one that's brought this in, or is it a different studio arrangement? I'm not sure. Do you have any idea?
Well, no, he got permission to screen it at the opening night of Jeff, yes.
Got it. So in other words, it's a studio film that,
Yes.
Right, got it. Okay, well, Jesse Eisenberg has used his Jewish family's roots to craft what is a fictitious story about cousins making a pilgrimage to their late grandmother's childhood home in Poland. And Eisenberg, as he's prone to do, he plays an anxious New Yorker. He's a married father of 1 and happens to be a digital ad salesman, and his name in this movie is David Kaplan. And his travelling companion on this week-long trip to Poland is Benji Kaplan, played by Kieran Culkin. And he's this larger-than-life character, lurches from personable to accusatory. And the two of them are very close in age. In fact, they were born 3 weeks apart. And Benji was particularly close to their grandmother, who only recently passed away. And Benji Kaplan acknowledges that he's been in a funk since she died. The pair, both he and David, were left money in their grandmother's will to take a heritage tour with a small number of fellow Jews. And they've got a mighty respectful British guide called James, played by Will Sharp, who explains the sightseeing will incorporate the country's painful past, and that, of course, includes a visit to a concentration camp. And although the pair of them care for one another, they're like chalk and cheese. They have a love-hate relationship. Benji, well, he can be charming, he can light up a room, and he appears to revel in being the life of the party. But then at a moment's notice, he can turn on those that he's just embraced. He's sort of the man who wears his heart on his sleeve. He's buoyant one moment and then he's melancholic the next. And he suffers a major meltdown after they board a train and they head straight to the first-class carriage that they've actually paid for. Now, given that Jews were transported to their deaths in overcrowded trains, Benji finds it totally inappropriate that that's the case, that they head to first class. And he says so forcefully, even though they've actually paid for it. Now, on more than the odd occasion, David, this is the Jesse Eisenberg character, who pops pills to calm himself, is embarrassed, actually ashamed of his cousin's behaviour. So their adventure is going to be filled with a series of highs and lows as Benji's odd temperament becomes a talking point amongst the group. So, okay, that's what it's all about. Given the subject matter, I found A Real Pain, well, surprisingly dull, Peter. Not enough happens to make it a compelling film, and we're only talking about 90 minutes. It was a struggle to make it to 90 minutes. It actually struggles to find any real traction beyond the fact that it showcases a pair of mismatched cousins and a few sights and sounds of Poland and its war-torn past. I was looking at my watch constantly, and that's a really bad sign. Okay, Kieran Culkin, clearly the star of the show. his embracing manic representation of Benji. No problems. Eisenberg, who also wrote and directed this film, plays along respectively as second fiddle. So he picks up the pieces when it's necessary to do so. And around them are four other travellers whose character development, especially the older couple, I found somewhat patchy. The most interesting of those is an African-born Jewish convert called Alonge, played by Kurt Egierwan, who embraces goodwill and his newfound religion. So, as the Oxford History Scholar Guide, Will Sharp comes across as a decent bloke trying to make the most of the traveller's Polish experience. He's not Jewish in this particular representation, but he's obviously empathetic towards what Poland has gone through. Musically, the movie leans heavily on a strong classical piano score. And again, I felt that at times that was kind of overwhelming. So I did want to like it. I really did want to like A Real Pain, but I thought it needed more levers to pull, more script development, and I really did find it underwhelming. So I can't understand why it's being lauded as much as it has been, Peter.
I think it's being lauded. It's a film that really impressed me because it deals with a current generation trying to deal with the Holocaust, with what happened in Poland, with the Nazi era, etc. And it's personified by these two cousins who each have their own psychological dimensions trying to deal with it. Kieran Culkin is superb as the cousin who has some real issues that have not been properly dealt with. And Jesse Eisenberg, who always likes to deal with characters that are somewhat confused or concerned or unhappy about circumstances, but muddle through somehow. This is the second film that Eisenberg has written and directed. His first was When You Finish Saving the World. And he is such a good actor, and he's now transferred his acting experiences in a number of good films into this film that he's written and directed. And I think it's very finely tuned and psychologically very appropriate. I really liked it. I liked the two characters. I liked the rest of the cast. I liked to see Jennifer Grey as one of the tour members. Of course, Jennifer Grey is probably best known for Dirty Dancing, and here she is as an older woman also trying to make sense of what is going on in regards to being Jewish and coping with modern day acceptance or not of Jewish life. I really liked the film. I think it was well developed, well observed, and in fact, I would have liked it to have been a bit longer to see what happened to Kieran Culkin's character. We're left with a question mark, and with Jesse Eisenberg and his relationship with his cousin and his family. A finely observed film. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, so let me ask you a few questions. Firstly, they go and visit the grandmother's home. Now, they don't actually go into the home. They don't knock on the door because the person I think they may have actually, and then the person isn't home, and then they lay a stone on the outside, which is obviously what one does, when you visit a grave. But I kind of thought, is that it? There's nothing more to be done there. That to me still left question marks, and I thought they could have been developed further, and it could have been more compelling. The other element here is that really, in terms of Holocaust representation and whatever, I understand that was only one part of it, but that was the whole point, that looking at the historic nature of Poland, etc., I thought that could have been handled. They could have given it more coverage. They could have done it in a better way. It was, don't get me wrong, it was respectful, but I didn't think that was developed as much. And I thought the other characters, okay, Jennifer Grey was fine, and the Alonge character as well. What was the older couple doing? What did they actually add to apart from being members of the group? So there's 3 questions I'd love you to answer.
All right, I'll try and answer those. The elderly couple, I'll start with them. They are probably representative of current Jews who want to forget, who don't want to rake over the coals, and are just there to satisfy their own interest in what happened in the past, but not to do much about it. They want to move on, to forget and to move on. So that's a perfectly understandable representation. I think the visiting the grandmother's house, of course, there's new people living there. That was circumvented when they left the stone outside by the neighbours, who said that leaving a stone there is potentially dangerous. You can trip over it. And I think that sort of ended their possible sentimentalising of that visit. And I think quite rightly, they internalised it and moved on. So I think that worked pretty well. And just trying to remember what the third point was.
I remember as well. Okay, so there was...
Oh, the Holocaust representation, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Overall,
I think the film, or Eisenberg, is very clever in not overstating the actual Holocaust representation. I think it could well have gone down that path, but he is interested more in the contemporary representation by people of what they think of it, what their memories might be, or what their families might have been involved with. And I think it becomes a somewhat more distant sort of area, which they don't want to rake over the coals on. And I think that works because contemporary Jews, in many respects, don't want to be hit over the head by that Holocaust representation anymore. They just want to understand and move on. So I think psychologically it works well.
But it's interesting because given since October 7, there's been the anti-Semitism has risen markedly, and I would have thought, I think this was shot before October 7, wasn't it?
It was, yes.
Yeah, it was, yeah. But because it is more relevant than ever, quite frankly. And, you know, I'd hate to think that future generations won't give it the necessary weight that I certainly believe it belongs. I mean, it's not a Holocaust film. It's not like The Pianist, not movies like that. I get that. But it was still, that was the theme. The Jewish theme was very strong here. Look, I think we just agree to disagree, because I honestly, I spoke to well over a dozen people who'd seen it at the Jewish International Film Festival, and there was only one who found it tolerable. The rest of us thought it was an inappropriate movie to have as the opening night festival film. And by the way, it's rated MA, and it runs for 90 minutes, a real pain, as mentioned. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10, and I'm struggling to give it a 6, to be honest. What about you?
Look, I really like the film. I think it's received a lot of accolades for Kieran Culkin, who's going to win probably the Golden Globe tomorrow, and possibly will get an Oscar nomination as well. I think because it is so well observed. I gave it an 8 out of 10.
All right, you're on JAir 88 FM, and if you want to subscribe, $54 is all you need. That's not a great deal, hopefully, although I know there is a cost of living crisis going on, so you've got to make your own decision about that, but you are supporting community radio. So go to j-air.com.au and you can make a decision one way or the other, but we value all of our listeners, and we've got programming 24/7. Now, another film that has received many plaudits is All We Imagine Is Light. That also came out on Boxing Day. It's an M-rated film that runs for just under 2 hours, and it's set in Mumbai and also in an Indian seaside village. So it's an empathetic slice of life movie that focuses on the fate of 3 women. And foremost amongst them is Prabha, played by Kani Kusruti. And she's a dedicated, highly regarded nurse at a Mumbai hospital, largely introspective. And she's in an arranged marriage. Her husband works in Germany. She actually has not heard from him for over a year. And to be candid, highly unlikely she'll ever hear from him again, although there is a gift that comes into focus during the course of this movie. Nevertheless, she politely and respectfully declines overtures from a doctor called Dr. Manoj, played by Aziz Nedumangad, who has worked at the hospital where Prabha works for a few months. Anu, played by Divya Prabha, is a young nurse. She lives and works with Prabha. As I say, lives and works with Prabha. And she's got a secret Muslim boyfriend called Shiaz, Ridu Haroon, whom she's desperate to find some alone time with so the pair can be intimate. She doesn't want to go down the same route as Prabha, and yet Anu's parents, who would not countenance Shiaz, are sending her photos of eligible men, right, in terms of trying to arrange a wedding for her. And then there's Parvati, played by Chaya Kadam, who also works at the hospital. She's being turfed out of the apartment where she's lived for 22 years. Her husband died and didn't give her the documentation that would have seen her retain ownership of the property. Instead, developers are moving her on, and she's left with no choice other than to return to her home village by the sea. And Prabha and Anu help her with her belongings. So there's quite a lyrical, poetic quality that the writer and director Payal Kapadia has imbued into All We Imagine Is Light. She really is a rich and redolent storyteller. And the story is told from a female perspective. It's a feminist work. And the impression one gains is that tradition and the patriarchy are still very much, well, they still very much hold the upper hand here. She's composed the picture to ensure that we care about each of the characters and want the very best for them. I got to say, Mumbai is another pivotal persona in the movie. It is, in effect, a persona. Really evocative cinematography by Ranabir Das well captures the hustle and bustle, the excitement of the city that never sleeps. And as somebody who's visited Mumbai, I can account for that. I can attest to that because it is a boisterous city and people gravitate towards it. But however long they remain there, the question is, can they ever call it home within this context of the movie All We Can Imagine Is Light? Performance is quite naturalistic, particularly that of Kani Kuzruti as Prabha, about whom there's an intensity, a disappointment and a sadness, and her eyes speak volumes. More of a rebellious streak in Anu, who wants to turn tail on the old ways of thinking, and her desire to do her own thing, very well captured by Divya Prabha. Frustration is the key ingredient that Chaya Kadam brings to Parvati, who falls foul of the system. Not for naught did All We Imagine Is Light, which captures the essence of city and village life, win the Grand Prix at the 2024 Cannes Film Festival. So I thought this was a solid, independent movie, something that, again, it's not mainstream in its proclivities, but it's well done. What did you think about All We Imagine Is Light, Peter?
I was very impressed by this film, and it's interesting to note that it's the second film from this director, so which is by coincidence similar to Eisenberg's second film as director. Anyway, this is such a well-observed film about the role of women in contemporary Indian society. This doesn't go the Bollywood path that so many Indian films tend to go, or the romantic sort of aspect. This is almost like a documentary, although of course it's not. It's a fictional film. And it's just so well observed by these two women who are nurses, trying to live their lives, trying to understand the different cultures that are impacting on them and how they can navigate that, knowing that India, of course, is still a patriarchal society. But it is gradually changing, and we're seeing that through the eyes of these two women in particular, and through the medical nursing sort of side of things that they focus on. Really love this film. Beautifully shot in Mumbai, and it gives you that impression of not just light, because that light is part of the title, but also of the changes that are happening in contemporary Indian urban society. Lovely film, beautifully observed, has received lots of nominations in different categories at different awards presentations, and I'm not surprised. This is really a superb film.
Well, it's interesting in as much as I think as a filmmaker, you've got somebody that we are going to be paying a lot of attention to because of her observation of the human condition. I'm really, like you, suitably impressed by her. She's not what I would call a conventional movie maker because as she has done, she takes a feminine look at something, and I thought it was it was quite a pointed commentary on the way of the world, and I found that extremely compelling. Peter, did you too?
Absolutely. Very compelling. It's interesting when you say it takes a feminine view of the world. I mean, more filmmakers should be being more even-handed in terms of looking at male and female representation in film, and I think this film does it so well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are seeing more of that, and we're certainly seeing a lot more inclusivity in movies, which is a terrific thing. I kind of also, you long for points of difference, and I was trying to draw a parallel between this and other movies that we've seen, and I quite frankly couldn't think of another one that had the same sort of zest to it. Can you think of a parallel film off the top or not?
What about the one My Old Ass is probably along those lines? Yeah.
Yeah. Potentially a little bit like it, although a little bit more mainstream, I would have thought. My Old Ass. Is it ass or arse? I would have thought arse, but there you go. I mean, again, it's got an interest. That's the one where they look back at the life of an older woman, isn't it? And is that yeah. I think this is a bit more sensitive, dare I say? I think this one it stands alone in my eyes. So, well, let's give it a score out of 10. It runs it for 118 minutes, rated M. All we imagine as light. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Peter?
I was suitably impressed by the film. I give it 9 out of 10.
Oh, okay. So we move from there to an animation, and as a franchise, this is done particularly well. And there's going to be more of them because it's done well, and the studio is sort of counting the money. So Sonic the Hedgehog 3, lots of color, lots of movement, lots of hijinks, and it's quite a complicated story. It takes a while, what's happening? Oh, it's moving from one thing to another. That's the first thing that struck me about this. And you know something, Peter? I went back a second time because I found it, if you sort of switched off for a few moments, it went on to something else. That's how I found it. But I'm pleased I went along. I enjoyed it the second time just as much as the first. I thought it was actually very well done. It's the latest installment of the video game spin-off. And Sonic, played by Ben Schwartz, or the voice thereof, and his pals Tails, Colleen O'Shaughnessy, and Knuckles, Idris Elba, they've settled into domestic bliss in a place called Green Hills. And that's after their decisive victory over the evil Dr. Robotnik, as played by Jim Carey. I mean, it's his movie in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 that came out in 2022. And suddenly, while on a camping trip with their foster parents, Tom and Maddie Wachowski, played by James Marsden and Tika Sumpter, they receive an urgent request. And it comes from Guardian Units of Nations, GUN, which is a secretive international security and military force. And after being held in suspended animation for 50 years, Shadow the Hedgehog, as voiced by Keanu Reeves, has broken free of captivity. And he's hell-bent on revenge after these 5 decades. The reason for his vitriol is the untimely death, decades earlier, of his only friend, a girl named Maria, played by Alia Brown. So Team Sonic is dispatched to Japan to try to stop Shadow from continuing to run amok. And they end up on a wild chase through the streets of Tokyo and London, and eventually in outer space. Also returning is Dr. Robotnik, who, as the story begins, has hit rock bottom. And he's joined by his ruthless 110-year-old lookalike grandfather, Gerald, who is very much on Shadow's side. The director, Jeff Fowler, is back at the helm, as are all the writers of Sonic 2, Pat Casey, Josh Miller, and John Whittington. So you can be assured of the continuation of the zaniness that characterised the earlier 2 films in this franchise. The story, well, it takes many a twist, and as mentioned, it requires some concentration to follow. It's another great vehicle for Carey. This time he plays opposite himself, filling the roles of both Dr. Robotnik and Dr. Robotnik's grandfather. The deliberately ridiculous, exaggerated handlebar moustaches on both set the scene very, very nicely. And while Dr. Robotnik is at first delighted to have found a family connection, Gerald is, well, hardly the warm, sharing, caring type. And as Sonic does a double take when he initially confronts Shadow, and he does. Sonic sort of thinks, what? Because Shadow looks just like him, only in different colours. And then, as events unfold, Sonic's forced to face his own demons. Dealing with loss and morality, they've got a big part to play in the outcome of this movie. And I've got to say, I want you to stay on until the last frame, because through the credits and then again at the very end, the picture points to developments in the next instalment. That's Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Did you enjoy it, Peter?
Not particularly. The first one was not bad. It sort of was a frenetic film based on the original game or video game, and did its best to fashion a story. And Jim Carrey, of course, to eat the scenery. Well, now there's two of him in this third version, and not only does he eat the scenery, I thought he ate half the audience. The film is just ludicrously stupid. And I must say the storyline was just tacked on so that they can have frenetic animation. Kids, I think, might like the colour and movement, but not appreciate some of the throwaway lines and gags that might work.
Wasn't it? It was complicated because it moved from one thing to another. No question. Yeah.
Yes, exactly, and it's the usual plot about seeking revenge, about making the world whole again, and about and it's just so dumb and pointless in many respects. I just felt disappointed by the whole franchise. I know there's going to be a Sonic 4 because I know it's already in the works, but Jim Carrey's character is just ridiculously over the top and overdeveloped. And
that's what he's noted for. And I think fans of Jim Carrey are going to say he's back doing what he does. You know, that's the whole point.
Yeah, but I found it tiresome. I found it was just not doing much for me. And I've seen so many other animations that are so much better in terms of script, in terms of storyline. I mean, obviously Inside Out 2 is just superb. Wild Robot, Memoirs of a Snail. I mean, there are so many other better animations. This one is just a throwaway for me. And so I was not impressed at all.
Well, let's score it. It's PG rated, runs 110 minutes. I'm giving it a 7. Sonic the Hedgehog 3, you?
Look, I'm afraid I can't pass it. I can only give it 4 out of 10.
My golly, gee, that's harsh. Let's. I want to talk about a movie that I caught up with, which I wanted to see at the time, and there was a clash. Black Dog. Now, this is redemption again. Is at the heart of a Chinese drama set on the edge of the Gobi Desert just before the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing. A former stunt motorcyclist called Lang, played by Eddie Peng, is a loner. He's just been paroled after being imprisoned for manslaughter. And he returns to his hometown, which has undergone quite a metamorphosis. In fact, it's been systematically dismantled to make room for new development. Many residents have already left, and the place looks like a ghost town. There's a large population of stray dogs that roams the street and the desert. One of those is a black dog, hence the title, thought to have rabies and is causing all sorts of havoc, biting people. And there's a bounty that's been put on this dog's head, which Lang initially goes for. But when he comes into contact with the animal, his view changes and the pair bonds. Meanwhile, city officials have launched a drive to rid the streets of strays, which Lang is roped into. And he faces all sorts of issues, including the fact that snake farmer Butcher Hugh, or Butcher Who, is out to avenge his nephew's death a decade ago, for which he holds Lang responsible. And presumably that's the reason that Lang went to prison. Now, Lang's father has moved to what's left of the rundown zoo in town. He's a heavy drinker and his health is fast deteriorating. The one new constant in Lang's life is that black dog, who, like Lang, faces all sorts of scrapes but keeps finding a way through. Against an uneasy and challenging backdrop, the co-writer and director Guan Hu has crafted a reflective piece about the changing face of China. There's a harsh grittiness to what unfolds here. Survival is far from assured. Who's not afraid to introduce a series of surprises as the narrative develops, including the arrival of a travelling circus, a member of which takes a shine to Lang. The landscape, well, it's barren, it's challenging. The cinematographer Wei Zhu Kiao has done a fine job in setting the scene, letting us know it's a place that's fallen on hard times. And an air of mystery surrounds Eddie Peng in the lead. As Lang is a man of few words, he's stoic, he's resilient with his own code of morality. His past comes back to haunt him, yet he must find a way to deal with it before he can actually move on. And there's something heroic, I reckon, in Peng's representation of Lang. The dog itself, like Lang, has an untamed spirit which dictates proceedings, and both will not be tamed. So it's quite an intriguing portrait of a man and a city at the crossroads. And I haven't seen many Chinese movies, as mentioned, but I think this one's a really good one. Black Dog. Peter?
Yes, I like this film. I think it had a fair bit to say about the contemporary China and how people on the outer, dogs on the outer, are being treated, and what happens to them if they don't quite conform. So I found there was a strong political subtext that was running through this film, certainly about being able to survive and being able to stay and resisting being killed or being removed because you don't quite fit into the political paradigm. So yes, I like the film a lot. I think it's very well shot. I just felt it was a little bit predictable insofar as we knew that there was going to be some sort of reconciliation or some sort of happiness that was going to come into the storyline. Otherwise, Chinese authorities that would have looked at this film might have felt that the film was too political for their liking. But yes, it's a good film. It's well directed, well presented, and it certainly has received attention at various film festivals around the world, quite deservedly. Yes, a good film.
Yeah, very good film. Well, look, I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. It is called Black Dog. It's rated M and runs for 110 minutes. You, Peter?
I gave it 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10, okay. Which would you consider that to be your average score or a little bit above your average score?
A little bit above average. I think my average is usually about 6.
Okay. Well, let's go to the movies that were released on the 1st of January, the New Year's Day. One of those, which again has done very well as a franchise, is Paddington. And it's Paddington in Peru in this case, runs for 106 minutes and is rated PG. And Paddington, voiced by Ben Whishaw, as it has been previously, gets back to his roots in what's a rather rollicking adventure with the Brown family. The rather intelligent bear remains living comfortably with the clan, although the Brown family I'm talking about, although there's now little connection between the parents and their 2 children. Judy, played by Madeline Harris, is applying for university entrance, and her mum, Mary, Emily Mortimer, is sad to be, quote unquote, losing her, because in America they usually go to another state or whatever to go to university, and they sort of move into the premises. Jonathan, Samuel Jocelyn, stays holed up in his room playing video games and chilling. Dad Henry, Hugh Bonneville, has a new American boss at the insurance firm where he works, and she takes a decidedly different approach to what he's used to. Her mantra is to, quote, embrace the risk, and that challenges him. Mary's taken up painting, but longs to return to a happier time when they're all sharing the couch together. And then suddenly, Paddington gets word from the Reverend Mother at the Home for Retired Bears, played by Olivia Colman. That's where his beloved Aunt Lucy, the voice of Imelda Staunton, lives. Apparently all isn't right. She's missing him terribly. So off to Peru, the family trots, with the ever-resourceful live-in housekeeper, Mrs. Bird, played by Julie Walters, in tow. When they arrive, the situation is actually worse than they expected. Aunt Lucy is missing. Thereafter begins this dangerous trip to the Amazon rainforest in search of her, as well as the lost treasure of El Dorado. The guide is a boat captain called Hunter. Antonio Banderas plays Hunter. And there is skullduggery afoot. So, Paddington in Peru. It's fun, it's creative, it's colourful. In fact, it's a delightful family film that features sight gags and mischief-making. I like the distinct personalities that continue to inhabit the franchise. Paddington maintains his charm and his composure for the most part. And obviously, at times, he gets into all sorts of precarious positions. Now, as Henry, Hugh Bonneville must find his wild side, while as Mary, Emily Mortimer gets what she's after with a family holiday. Julie Walters brings a suspicious streak to Mrs. Bird. Antonio Banderas has greed coursing through his veins as Captain Hunter. And then there's the super nice, or is she, Mother Superior, as played by the cheery Olivia Colman. Setting action in Peru brings with it peril and pursuit, giving this movie a nice edge. I also greatly appreciated the focus on heritage, as well as the unexpected ending, which I am not about to spoil. So that is Paddington in Peru, Peter.
Yes, I really liked the first two Paddington films. They were well written, cleverly crafted, nicely observed, family and bear sort of stories with very good animation, CGI on top of live action, etc. That worked really well for me. The second one just had some very clever ideas and some good writing, which appealed to both young and old. This one, I thought, diverged somewhat from the first two films, and I think became somewhat sentimentalized and introduced characters that were not particularly interesting. I mean, Antonio Banderas's character is the ship's captain with his daughter, that turned into an adventure sort of situation. I don't think that worked for me at all. I think that was just too over the top and silly, and took the focus away from Paddington's character and having adventures that are a bit more oriented towards him, and finding Lucy and so on. And plus, Olivia Colman as the singing nun, I thought, no, this ain't no Sound of Music. I thought, I don't know, I wasn't sure about the character and about what relevance it had and what it was trying to do, because I mean, really, the film had a sort of a nasty sort of subtext about thieving and robbery and misrepresentation and all that sort of thing. I thought, I don't know. I'm not sure if it's true to the Paddington character. And Paddington having to be an adventure hero as well, I thought, no, I would have liked a bit better writing and a bit better story development than that.
Even though Peru, the connection with the bears, I thought that was actually strong when it got to that point.
Yeah, to some extent, yes. Peru serves as a nice location, although I don't think it was actually shot in Peru. But anyway, that's another story. I thought it doesn't quite work at all for me. And the adventures that happen in the second half of the film just seemed a bit silly, bit over the top. I wanted better writing.
Whereas I quite like this. I quite like Paddington. Yeah. So it's PG rated, 106 minutes. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10.
Okay, I give it because I like the Paddington character, and I like the special appearance later in the film. I thought 6 out of 10.
Okay. Well, the other one that was released on New Year's Day was Nosferatu. And this is a long film, 133 minutes, rated MA. It's atmospheric and, dare I say, it puts the bite on an impressionable youngster, does it not, Peter?
It does.
Who carries her commitment to Dracula into her marriage with terrifying consequences. The writer and director is Robert Eggers, who did The Lighthouse. That was the black and white movie. Very much an independent film. He's at the helm of what is a supernatural horror. And he was inspired by Bram Stoker's novel Dracula that came out in 1897 and by the screenplay for Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror that was released in 1922. That was by Henrik Galeen. Anna Harding, played by Emma Corrin, effectively makes a pact with the vampire when she is but a teenager. And thereafter, she's plagued by nightmarish visions, which carry on when she falls in love and marries Friedrich, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson. When Friedrich's given the opportunity for a leg up in the real estate business in which he works by securing a client's signature in no less a place than Transylvania, she is concerned. Anna has a premonition about what's about to happen, and she implores Friedrich not to go, but her husband dismisses her apprehension. Little does he know that the client is none other than the notorious Nosferatu, a.k.a. Count Orlok, played by Bill Skarsgård, who local gypsies recognise as evil personified. In no time, he has Friedrich terrified, before he hitches a ride in a crate on a ship back to the Baltic German town in which Friedrich and Anna live in the 1830s. Nosferatu means to eliminate Friedrich and reclaim Anna, who by now is experiencing seizures. Still, Anna's having a hard time convincing her best friend Ellen Hutter, Lily Rose Depp, Johnny Depp's daughter, and her husband Thomas, Nicholas Holt, that her fears are real. Soon enough, though, that changes when Nosferatu gets a taste of blood. On Anna's side is a knowledgeable university professor, played by Willem Dafoe, who recognises just what a threat Count Orlok poses. With alternating sequences in black and white and colour, a portent of doom hangs over Nosferatu. There's a loud and potent score that underpins the dread. Now, fine as that is, given the subject matter, I found the storyline disjointed, convoluted, and unnecessarily drawn out. Well, in short, the film laboured. And there's no way this movie justifies a 2-hour-plus running time. Emma Corrin has a bit of a thankless task. At one point, she remarkably transforms from being off with the pixies to normal, without so much as a beg pardon. I wasn't sold, nor was I, of many of the other transitions that constitute this film. Bill Skarsgård mumbles his way through his role as the devil incarnate in a foreign accent. Willem Dafoe, really unconvincing as the august professor, and like much of the picture, what he does feels affected, with a capital A. I simply didn't buy what he or the other characters were selling. In many instances, the dialogue sounded disingenuous, the acting appeared forced, and I just couldn't countenance Nosferatu, which became a very, very long set. And it goes down as the earliest of contenders for the worst film of this year, Peter.
Oh my goodness, that is a pretty tough commentary on a film that I think Eggers has done a pretty good job in revisiting the original silent film. We should also mention that there were 2 other Nosferatu films that were made. So this, I think, is the 4th version of Nosferatu. The original film was originally called Dracula. And was made in 1922 by F.W. Murnau in a very expressionistic sort of style, only ran for about 70 minutes or so. The Count was actually meant to be Dracula. But when the film was released, Bram Stoker did not give permission for them to call the film Dracula and to use the term Dracula. And so hence the name change to Nosferatu. However, the original silent film is, I think, the template in which all the other films have to meet. Max Schreck played the Dracula-like character and did such a brilliant job, especially in the muted black and white that the film was shot in, that any other version of that film, even if it's shot in colour or muted colour, would never live up to the original, which was just so superb. So this new version, this fourth version of Nosferatu, I think does a reasonable job. It gets into the psychological horror of the Count, or Dracula, if we use that in inverted commas, and of the power that he has over people, in particular women, and also of the notion of the rats that are symbolic of the invasion of the town and of the nastiness that can happen when things go awry. I liked the film. I think it was well developed. Yes, it is long, but it also introduced some other characters, some other perspectives, in addition to obviously what was in the original silent film. And I think because of that, it did it quite well. I like Eggers' style. I like the way he uses close-up. I like the way he uses blood and gore in a particular way, and keeps it on hold for most part of the film. So yeah, I thought it was a pretty good attempt at revisiting the original film.
It made my skin crawl, and I was looking at my watch a lot, and I'm afraid that I cannot really fathom why they've done it this way. Nosferatu, I keep saying, Nosferatu, rated MA, 2 hours, 13 minutes, a fail, 4 out of 10.
Okay, I I quite liked it, and I think it has some elements that really worked, so I give it 7 out of 10.
All right, so you've failed one, I've failed one. What doesn't fail is a musical that I saw, which you would have seen in cinematic form, School of Rock, the musical. Now, I saw that. I went to Frankston, and I went there on New Year's Eve because that was the opening night. And it's lively, it's cheery, it upends political correctness. In fact, it is really the perfect holiday treat. And it features the music of Andrew Lloyd Webber, lyrics by Glenn Slater, book by Julian Fellows. And it's based on the 2003 film that you saw, Peter.
Yep.
A real hit for Jack Black, wasn't it? In fact, it was a perfect vehicle for Jack Black, I think.
Yes.
The recalcitrant teacher, the recalcitrant Peter. It works well, doesn't it, Peter?
Oh, it's the story of my life.
Exactly. Yeah, it is. It is. You could have played the character, yeah, very much so, right? How's your singing voice, Peter? I've never heard it.
Dreadful. I need to be dubbed.
Is there are you a shower singer, Peter, or not? Or you don't sing at all?
I don't sing at all.
You spare the world, Peter. Very good.
I do.
Okay. Well, okay. So Jack Black, of course, played the most unlikely of teachers. Well, hang on. The analogy keeps on going, but in another life you were a teacher, weren't you?
Correct.
Yes. Right. Were you drummed out of school like the character here?
With a real drum? No. I never taught music.
With very good reason, I gather. If you're tone deaf, it's very good. Thank goodness for that. You've spared the world. Very good.
Yes.
Okay. Well, okay. This as a musical, it debuted on Broadway in December 2015, and now PLOS Musical Productions brings us all the colour and the hijinks at Frankston Arts Centre. So that's in Melbourne southeast. If you happen to be watching, listening, or doing other things from interstate or overseas. Dewey Finn cannot take a trick. He's struggling. He's an out-of-work rock singer and guitarist, just been kicked out of his band, as well as being fired from his job at a record store because he's totally unreliable. He's unable to pay his rent, which he's lent upon to make good on by his friend Ned Schneebly's domineering girlfriend, Patty DeMarco. And that's when opportunity knocks. Let me be more accurate. Dewey takes advantage of an opportunity that wasn't meant for him. Rosalie Mullins, who's the principal of this hoity-toity school, calls to offer Schneebly a well-paid substitute teacher's position because he is a substitute teacher. This is the friend of Dewey. Anyway, Dewey assumes Schneebly's persona. He takes the job at Horace Green School, where he will be teaching 5th graders. And in keeping with his reckless ways, he arrives for the first day late, totally unprepared, and hungover. Now, that was just the next day. The teacher said you can start immediately, but he still decided to tie one on. Now, the seemingly straight-laced, uptight, by-the-book principal doesn't know what's hit her, and neither do the children. Dewey abandons the set curriculum, gives over his classes to form a band, complete with backup singers and roadies. He wants them to compete in the Battle of the Bands competition, where his former band, No Vacancy, will feature. And $20,000 prize money is on offer. But that's hardly what the parents paid massive tuition fees for. In fact, $50,000 a year at grade, what was that, with the age group, fifth graders. Certainly not what fellow teachers nor the principal were ready to countenance. So it's only a matter of time before the proverbial dam wall bursts. So in what is a talent-laden show, Clint Wood leads from the front as Dewey Finn, strong projection and charisma to burn. And he quickly wins us over as the anti-hero imbued with the spirit of rock. He's unquestionably the one that ignites this musical, which I've seen a second time, I might say. I went back the second night. Emily Wilkinson is the complete package as Principal Mullins. Her strut sets the tone, but it's her vocalisation that marks her as a star. I mean that, whether it's operatic or pop, she delivers magnificently. As Ned, Ryan Purdy has subjugation down pat, and Sarah Cossey Glaubert doesn't hold back as his domineering girlfriend Patty. Matilda Doughty brings attitude to her representation as Miss Goody Two-Shoes turned band manager Summer. And then there's Surprise Packet, the Surprise Packet, Summer Bush, who readily transitions to Mika from shy to potent as the latter finds her voice. There's actually 13 young cast members. They excel as Dewey's students turn bandmates, and they are on song when they harmonise. Some of them have got better voices than others, but as a harmony, they do a really good job. They're backed by an enthusiastic adult ensemble who play the parents and the teachers. And let me not forget the musical strains of the pit band, some of whom double as the band No Vacancy. Fine direction from Brad Fisher, musical direction Bev Woodford, choreography by Jessica Pratt and Talia Sweatman. This School of Rock is a winner. Brett Wingfield's costume design, from downbeat to classroom to rock chic, hits the mark. Set changes, there lots of them, plentiful, they're smooth. By way of props, I couldn't take my eyes off the slide-in, slide-out desk and chair combination, or the single bed propped up by green plastic milk crates, green and a few other colours. Big fan of those. And I like Daniel Zhao's colourful lighting and Marcello Rico's buoyant sound design. So Plus's School of Rock, the musical, is rousing and it's rebellious. Dare say even Fleetwood Mac's Stevie Nicks, she's a favourite, by the way, of Principal Mullins. Stevie Nicks would be proud of what's stitched up here because it really does, pardon the pun, strike a chord. It's on at Frankston Arts Centre until the 11th of January. So you've still got, 6 days to see it? Go along. Just get into artcentre.frankston.vic.gov.au, go onto the What's On section, and you can book tickets to School of Rock, the musical. It is a fine, worthy production, Peter. Even you might enjoy this one. Yeah.
I've seen the film.
Did you like the film?
Yes.
There you go. Well, that's a starting point, Peter. So you can imagine with live human beings in front of you, not that they were dead when they were filming, but nevertheless, that extra dimension, the X factor. It works beautifully. So anyway, I commend it to you. And there's not much on, although there is, starting at where we're talking about the Botanic Gardens, there are a couple of things. There's a Shakespearean production, which is actually it's one of the Shakespearean productions that you don't hear a lot about, but The Merry Wives of Windsor is on there. The Wind in the Willows is on there. So you can check out what's on at the Botanic Gardens as we speak. Peter, thanks very much for your contribution.
And I should mention the Golden Globe Awards will be on television tomorrow from 12 noon on Channel 10.
Which is terrific. And in fact, I think they're replayed at 7:30.
Correct.
Good stuff, Peter. Be well. Catch up with you. Have a good new year and keep on being Peter.
Okay, all the best, Alex. Thanks.
Cheers now. You've been listening to First on Film and Entertainment.